The world is not a vampire. I repeat, not a vampire. This motherfucker is an asshole. It's almost Christmas, and I know that most, if not all of us, at some point in our lives have said, it's weird. It doesn't even feel like Christmas to me. This year has been mostly hell, large in part to the Orange Grinch, who threatened to let millions of Americans starve. And now most of us are fucked as far as insurance coverage, which unfortunately will probably lead to more people being hungry and also dead. As a person who had to quit working due to being disabled, most importantly, quit working without a disability check, my insurance was $30. Now it's over $300. I am unemployed due to multiple system failure of my spine and central nervous system. Basically, all of my engine lights are on. They've been on for 30 years. These government officials swore to support and defend the U.S. Constitution, bear true faith to it, and faithfully and impartially discharge their duties for the public good, acting as a link between citizens and government, serving the people, and prioritizing the Constitution over political whims. Their oath binds them to the nation's foundational principles, ensuring they serve constituents by upholding laws, promoting justice, and delivering tangible benefits to their communities. They swore to uphold the Constitution. That shit didn't work. And I have not had or do not have any tangible benefits. I don't feel served. I haven't seen any public good, but I digress. I will say that I am really very afraid that food stamp funding might be on the bullshit chopping block again. And maybe as soon as January. The Republicans were sent home early so they wouldn't have to do their jobs, release all of the unredacted files, and fix these fucking insurance subsidies and shit. And because we are, in fact, in a hostile government takeover, I honestly think if I got online and saw a portal to another dimension or timeline or something like that opened and a fucking huge flying fire-breathing dragon was flying around our sky, I wouldn't be surprised. Not one damn bit. The cruelness of this regime seems to know no bounds. So I decided to look into what Christmas was like for the slaves. And yes, I did connect the two because of the cruelty. And please stay to the end of the video because the devil works hard, but the PR team for the whites works harder. So History.com had an article titled, "What Was Christmas Like for America's Enslaved People?" The article states, for some, it was a rare time of respite. For others, an opportunity for resistance. So how did Americans living under slavery experience the Christmas holidays? While early accounts from white Southerners after the Civil War often painted an idealized picture of the slave owners' generosity, met by grateful workers happily feasting, singing, and dancing, the reality was far more complex. In the 1830s, the large slaveholding states of Alabama, Louisiana, and Arkansas became the first in the United States to declare Christmas a state holiday. It was in these southern states and others during the antebellum period, which is 1812 through 61, that many Christmas traditions, giving gifts, singing carols, decorating homes, firmly took hold in American culture. Many enslaved workers got their longest break of the year, typically a handful of days, and some were granted the privilege to travel to see family or get married. Many received gifts from their owners and enjoyed special foods that were untasted the rest of the year. But while many enslaved people partook in some of these holiday pleasures, Christmas time could be treacherous. According to Robert E. May, a professor of history at Purdue University and author of Yuletide in Dixie, Slavery, Christmas, and Southern Memory, owners' fears of rebellion during the season sometimes led to preemptive shows of harsh discipline. Their buying and selling of workers didn't abate during the holidays, nor did their annual hiring out of enslaved workers, some of whom would be shipped off away from their families on New Year's Day, which is widely referred to as Heartbreak Day. What is Heartbreak Day, you ask? Heartbreak Day, or Hiring Day, for enslaved people in the U.S. was New Year's Day, a time of intense dread when slaveholders settled their debts by selling or renting enslaved family members, often separating them permanently, a stark contrast to the hope for freedom that became associated with the Emancipation Proclamation. On January 1863, and the tradition of watch night services on New Year's Eve. January 1st marked the end of the yearly contracts, again a crucial time for slave owners to collect debts and settle finances. To meet financial obligations, owners would sell or lease enslaved people, leading to brutal, sudden separations of families, and it was a devastating reality that somehow we are still seeing today. Black churches developed watch night services on New Year's Eve, a tradition of staying awake and praying for freedom, as mentioned by the National Museum of African American History and Culture. On January the 1st again, President Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, which made New Year's Day a symbol of liberation for many, linking it to freedom and hope, notes the National Museum of African American History and Culture and Forbes. Today, watch night services continue, blending reflection on slavery's pain with prayers for the future, while New Year's Day traditions like eating black-eyed peas and greens, which were foods that enslaved people could grow, symbolize wealth and prosperity. See, we affect everything because everybody eats that. But still at Christmas, it offered enslaved people to respite, kind of, for their minds to try to escape and form resistances. Some of the slaveholders gave their slaves gifts and time to use, and they used the relative looseness of the holiday celebrations and times to plot escapes. For slaveholders, gift-giving connotated power. Christmas gave them the opportunity to express their paternalism and dominance over the people they owned, who almost universally lacked the economic power or means to purchase gifts. Owners often gave their enslaved workers things they withheld throughout the year, like shoes, clothing, and money. According to Texas historian Elizabeth Silverthorne, one slaveholder from that state gave each of his family $25. The children were given sacks of candy and pennies. Christmas Day, we gave out our donations to the servants. They were much pleased, and we were saluted on all sides with grins, smiles, and low bows, wrote one Southern planter. In his book, The Battle for Christmas, historian Stephen Nissenbaum recounts how a white overseer considered giving gifts to enslaved workers on Christmas a better source of control than physical violence. He says, "I killed 28 head of beef for the people's Christmas dinner. I can do more with them in this way than if all the hides of the cattle were made into lashes or a whip." Enslaved people rarely made reciprocal gifts to their owners, according to historians Shauna Bingham and Robert May. Fleeting displays of economic equality would have controverted the enslaved workers' prescribed role of childlike dependency. On one plantation in the Low Country, South Carolina, some enslaved house workers gave their owners eggs wrapped in handkerchiefs. I hope they were rotten. Yet, overall, the one-sided nature of gift-giving between slave owners and those they enslaved reinforced the dynamic of white power and paternalism. And because women really, really should run the world, and we all know it, I was not surprised to learn that women used Christmas to fight slavery. They used it to finance the abolition cause. Women organized Christmas bazaars that sold, donated gifts, and trumpeted the anti-slavery message. For enslaved workers, Christmas time represented a break between the end of harvest season and the start of preparation for the next year of production, which was a brief sliver of freedom in lives that were marked by heavy labor and bondage. This time was regarded as our own by the grace of our masters, and we therefore used or abused it nearly as we pleased, wrote famed writer, orator, and abolitionist Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass escaped slavery at the age of 20. He said, "Those of us who have families at a distance were generally allowed to spend the whole 6 days," and that's the days between Christmas and New Year's, "in their society." Some used these more relaxed holidays to run for freedom. Get it? In 1848, Ellen and William Craft, an enslaved married couple from Macon, Georgia, used passes from their owners during Christmas time to concoct an elaborate plan to escape by train and steamer to Philadelphia. Also, on Christmas in 1854, Underground Railroad icon Harriet Tubman set out from Philadelphia to Maryland's Eastern Shore after she had heard her 3 brothers were going to be sold by their owner the day after Christmas, Heartbreak Day. The owner had given them permission to visit family on Christmas Day, but instead of the brothers meeting with their families for dinner, their sister Harriet led them to freedom in Philadelphia. Yes, you heard this beautiful shit correctly. Harriet Tubman freed her brothers Ben, Henry, and Robert from slavery during a daring Christmas Eve rescue mission in 1854. They used coded messages to guide them and others to freedom via the Underground Railroad. In 1854, she sent a coded message via a free black man named Jacob Jackson, instructing her brothers to meet her at their parents' cabin, ready to step aboard the good old ship of Zion, which was the Underground Railroad. So she met along with them on this Christmas Eve, along with their fiancés and 3 others, and guided over 100 miles to freedom, reaching William Steele's anti-slavery office in Philadelphia on December 29th. She repeatedly risked her own life, making multiple trips back to Maryland to save family and friends, earning her the nickname Moses for leading so many to liberty. Check out the book of Exodus. For enslaved people, resistance during Christmas time didn't always take the form of rebellion or fight in a geographical or physical sense. Often, it came in the way that they adapted the dominant society's traditions into something of their own, allowing for the purest expression of their humanity and cultural roots. In Wilmington, North Carolina, enslaved people celebrated what they called John Cunnerig. Other names include John Cuckoo, John Canis, and John Canoe, where they dressed in wild costumes and went from house to house singing, dancing, and beating rhythms with rib bones, cow's horns, and triangles. At every stop, they expected to receive a gift. Every child rises on Christmas morning to see the John Canis remembered writer and abolitionist Harriet Jacobs in her autobiography, Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl. Without them, Christmas would be shorn of its greatest attraction, which is gifts, I guess, to this slave girl. John Cuckoo is a well-known African diaspora holiday tradition celebrated in the Caribbean. North Carolina is one of the rare places in North America with records of John Kununu. John Kununu roots are deeply historical, although debated to this day. Many believe the name comes from John Canoe, an African chief who fought for the right to keep his people's traditions alive. There's also a belief that the name originates from the French term gens innocuous or unknown people, a reference to the masquerade-style disguises popular during the earliest Junkanoo parades. However, by the early 1900s, the tradition faded as Jim Crow laws took hold. Raise your hand if you thought that the happiness and humanization of these enslaved African people would be something that would be allowed to occur and continue. If you raised your hand, you definitely need to be here. Bring your family the next time and all your friends. We should talk, all of us, because what in the hell are we doing? What are we doing? Amid contentious national pushback over how much of the full history of slavery in the United States should be taught in schools, the holiday season represents a particularly overlooked period. Around the time that Christmas was starting to become a national holiday in the late 19th century, propagandists of the lost cause, which is the myth lie that the Civil War was fought for states' rights and not for slavery. They were trying to reframe what happened in the South during the antebellum era and make it seem more pleasant and syrupy, like that Uncle Remus bullshit, and not the unimaginable hell of butt rape for embarrassment and cutting babies out of their mothers' stomachs. While they lost the war, one way they tried to win hearts and minds and political power was by telling romanticized stories about Christmas time. These accounts supported the Confederate myth that enslaved people appreciated their masters and mistresses, often describing them dancing and feasting and taking part in Christmas gift exchanges with the families who enslaved them. But the myth couldn't be further from reality. Many enslaved people spent the holidays worrying about getting sold or faced violence like whippings. For his 2019 book, Yuletide in Dixie, Slavery, Christmas, and Southern Memory, historian Robert E. May reviewed plantation owners' diaries, periodicals, memoirs, as well as oral accounts from those formerly enslaved to see what really happened on plantations at Christmas. Here he talks to Time magazine about the most shocking examples and how unpacking lost cause myths can help tell a fuller picture of the history of slavery. They asked him what is the value of looking at Christmas time as a lens to study this period of slavery during the Civil War and in the antebellum South. And he said that if we really want to understand why America's bloodiest war occurred in the first place, we must recognize the important part Christmas played in Civil War causation. Many of the figures who were involved in the coming Civil War spoke out on Christmas on one side or the other. I wouldn't say that you could understand the Confederate defeat from studying Christmas in the Confederacy, but you can see that Southerners tried to create a national identity that was partly molded around Christmas. 90 to 95% of the Christmas propaganda is a product of the period from about 1880, a few years after the North stopped enforcing Reconstruction, to about 1929 when the stock market crash occurred. This was during the time when white Southerners created the so-called lost cause to justify the Confederate lifestyle. In the 1890s, Southerners were trying to reclaim national power in Washington, D.C., and a part of their tactics was to fight back ideologically. They were very defensive, and so they wrote these very mellow accounts of slave times. They were defending the way of life of the Old South. The United Daughters of the Confederacy would give these warm-hearted appraisals of the Christmas experience of the South's enslaved peoples. Scores of authors would devote whole chapters to Christmas in memoirs, novels, and short stories. They aren't just about Christmas, but Christmas was a major focus. One of the most important components of these works was trying to defend slavery and Southern customs before the Civil War. And they did win over a lot of hearts with it. The one writing that affected people the most was probably Joel Chandler Harris's fucking Uncle Remus stories. They were so popular, they described the joy of the Christmas holiday for slaves, and Disney picked that shit right on up in the movie Song of the South. It's very interesting. Short stories, poems, illustrations for magazines like Harper's and others with pictures of Christmases after the war showing former enslaved people who still loved their former masters and mistresses so much that even though they were no longer subject to their will, they would come by their houses after Christmas bearing presents for reunions. There were even lion stories, cases of masters and mistresses giving enslaved people as Christmas gifts to family members, that's the truth, and to their children. They also asked Mr. May about the national debate about teaching the whole history of slavery. His answer is that we really do need to liberate teachers to address the past critically, not just about enslavement, but our whole history of race in America. As long as we don't address it hypercritically, we're never going to realize what really happened in the past. We're going to perpetuate these myths that I think have helped underwrite segregation and discrimination in America for decades. And we're going to leave American school children in the dark, which is what Trump wants. While teaching slavery critically is not necessarily a pleasant experience, he says, we have to engage with the past realistically. Frederick Douglass, who was an orator, author, emancipator, and former slave, said, "From what I know of the effects of these holidays upon the slave, I believe them to be among the most effective means in the hands of the slaveholder in keeping down the spirit of